Hello dear students, welcome to the part 2 video for the lesson Earth, Sun and Moon. In the first part of this lesson, we have learned about the layers of the Earth. In this video, you will be learning about the phases of the Moon and the phenomena of tides. You'll also be learning about the artificial satellites and their different types. Learn some fun facts about the Sun, and we'll also learn about eclipses, solar and lunar eclipses and their subtypes. So without much ado, let's go right into our lesson. Satellites or moons. Already familiar with the definition of satellites. A satellite is an object that moves around a larger object. Our planet Earth has just one natural satellite or moon called the Moon with a capital M. Jupiter has at least 64 moons, whereas Mercury and Venus have none. The Moon is the fifth largest natural satellite in the solar system and is non-luminous like all the other satellites. That is, it only reflects the sunlight and does not produce its own light. The Moon's surface is about 9.4 billion acres. As large as that might sound, this area is actually smaller than that of the continent of Asia. The Moon does not have an atmosphere, and its surface is full of craters and mountains. This gives rise to several questions, such as why doesn't the Moon have an atmosphere? Why are craters common on the Moon but not on the Earth? And thirdly, why can sound not be heard on the Moon? The answers to all of these questions are connected to the comparatively small gravitational pull of the Moon. The Moon being much smaller than the Earth, its gravity is just 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. This is why it is considered that the Moon has no atmosphere like that on Earth. Huge solid Huge solid bodies called meteorites have crashed on the Moon's surface, forming the craters. Now, while craters were quite common on the Earth's surface too, the processes of plate tectonics, about which we learned in the last video, as well as the processes of volcanic eruptions, cover up all evidences of these events, and therefore we do not see as many craters on the Earth's surface. But also, any small meteoroids entering the Earth's atmosphere would burn because of the great air resistance which arises due to the layers of the Earth's atmosphere. Lastly, sound requires a medium to be transferred. The lack of an atmosphere on the Moon makes it impossible for sound to travel on the Moon's surface. The Moon has been an object of intrigue and wonderment to all kids right from early childhood with its changing shapes. The Moon seems to be hiding completely away from us sometimes and seems to be showing more or less of its beautiful face on different nights. This is actually because the amount of moon seen from the Earth changes over the month. The different shapes that we see from the Earth are called the phases of the Moon. Now remember that one half of the Moon is always lit up by the sun except during a lunar eclipse, but we only see a portion of it that's lit up. When the Moon is on the same side of the Earth as the sun, we cannot see it. This is because the illuminated side of the lunar surface is facing away from us and only the shadow side is visible. This phase is called the new moon phase, where we do not see the moon at all. And this happens on the day side of the Earth. When the moon is on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun, we see the fully illuminated side, and this phase is called the full moon. It appears to be a full glowing circle during a full moon. The period between a new moon and a full moon are when we see it appears to change its shape or go through different phases. The phases of the moon relate to the amount of light we see on the moon's surface as it orbits the earth. When the moon appears to be growing in illumination from new moon to the full moon, it is said to be waxing. So these are the waxing phases. When the cycle progresses from full moon to new moon and the moon's illumination seems to be decreasing, it is said to be waning. So these are the waning phases. So waxing means the moon is growing in its illumination. That is, the moon is getting brighter from the right to the left. Waning means the moon is shrinking or the moon becomes darker and darker on the right. The three main terminologies in moon phases are gibbous, crescent, and quarter. Let's take a closer look at these. The gibbous phase is when more than half the moon is visible. The crescent is when less than half of the moon is visible. The quarter is when exactly half of the moon is visible, and the moon appears to be a full circle in the full moon. That is, 100% of the moon is visible during a full moon. A full moon is also called the Purnima in Indian language. The moon seems to be completely disappearing in the new moon, which is also called the Amavasya. Moon's revolution around the earth takes almost 30 days, and this period is what we call as a lunar month. So it would take around 2 weeks from new moon to full moon and another 2 weeks for the moon to wane off from a full moon to a new moon. The moon's gravitational force on earth generates something called the tidal force. If you've ever been to a seaside, you would have experienced the power of tides when the sea seems to rise up or go below the normal. The tides are the rise and fall of water level in the oceans of the earth. When the sea level rises to its highest point, it is what we call as the high tide. And when it falls to its lowest point, that's called a low tide. There are other factors also that contribute to tides, and that is the sun's gravitational pull as well as the earth's rotation, in addition to the gravitational pull of the moon, which is the most important factor. The tidal forces causes earth and its water to bulge on the sides closest to the moon and the side farthest from the moon. These bulges of water are what we call as high tides. Now comes the part of the rotation of the earth. As the earth rotates, most regions of the earth pass through both of these bulges each day. So, when you are in one of the bulges, you experience a high tide. When you are not on one of the bulges, you experience a low tide. The cycle of two high tides and two low tides occur on most days on most coastal lines of the world over a period of 24 hours and between 6-hour intervals. The sun's gravitational pull also causes tides, just like the moon does, though they are somewhat smaller because the sun is much farther away. When the earth, moon, and the sun line up during a full moon or a new moon, the sum of their gravitational pulls lead to more extreme tides. When the moon is in the quarter phase, which happens twice a month, the sun and moon are at right angles to the earth, and their total gravitational pull on the earth's water is weakened because it comes from two different directions, causing the difference between high tide and low tide to be the least. Now let's learn about artificial satellites. An artificial satellite is an object that people have made and launched into orbit using rockets. There are currently over 1,000 active satellites orbiting the Earth. So we could say that the outer space of the Earth is almost as busy as the traffic junctions in our metropolitan city. Today, space shuttles are used to launch satellites and also to recover damaged satellites and return them to the Earth. A space shuttle has many facilities which help the astronauts to live in space for many days. Let's take a look at some satellite touchdowns. The first artificial satellite ever launched was the Soviet Sputnik 1, which was launched in 1957 by Russia or USSR. Almost 18 years later, India launched its first satellite, that is the Aryabhat, named after the great Indian astronomer who invented zero. It was also launched by Russia on 19 April 1975, but the satellite was that of Indian origin. The Mars Orbiter mission, also called as the Mangalyaan, is a space satellite that was launched by ISRO on 5th November 2013. It's a space probe or satellite which has been orbiting Mars since 24th September 2014. And even though it was thought to have only a life of 6 months, it is still active today and keeps sending us more and more information on the red planet that is the Mars. It is a matter of great pride that India was the first nation to reach Mars on a maiden attempt, that is, a first attempt. Now, the size and altitude and design of a satellite may depend on its purpose. Communication satellites allow telephone and data conversations to be relayed through satellites. Navigation satellites help in the navigation or movement of ships and planes. Weather satellites are useful to meteorologists to study the weather pattern and also to forecast the weather. Observation satellites photograph the Earth and observe the planet Earth for changes in everything from temperature to melting of ice sheets. Military satellites, also called as spy satellites, are used by the military, and the true objective or application of these satellites remain a secret and is not open to the public. A scientific satellite carries instruments to obtain data on magnetic fields, Earth and its atmosphere, the sun or other stars, planets and their moons, and other astronomical objects and phenomena. So you could say that the Mars orbiter mission or Mangalyaan is an example of a scientific satellite. Now let's learn more about the sun, the star of our solar system. The star is a big ball of hot burning gases. Which gases? It's mostly made up of hydrogen and helium, and the hydrogen on the sun is continuously changing into helium. Now, this process is a process which is highly explosive and it results in the release of huge amounts of light and heat energy, which we call as solar energy. It's the sun's gravitational and magnetic field that's holding together our entire solar system, allowing the planets to move around their orbits. Here are some sun facts that you must have collected. The diameter of the sun is around 1.4 million kilometers. The temperature of the surface of the sun is almost 6,000 degrees Celsius, which is close to the temperature of the innermost layer of the earth, that is the inner core. The temperature of the center of the sun is 15 million degrees Celsius. The distance from the earth to the sun is around 150 million kilometers. Moving on to the topic of eclipses. An eclipse occurs when one object in space blocks an observer from seeing another object in space. We are familiar with solar and lunar eclipses. These eclipses occur when the three astronomical objects, that is the sun, the earth, and the moon, are aligned or coming to a single line with each other. And based on their arrangement, we could have either a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. The orbit of the moon is tilted at around 5 degrees Celsius against the orbit of the earth and the sun. For this reason, the chances of such an alignment happening is only around 2 to 3 times every year. To understand more about eclipses, we need to learn about two terms which has something to do with shadows. Any shadow cast has two main parts, the umbra and the penumbra. The umbra is a portion of the shadow that is in complete darkness, and the penumbra lies around the umbra and is a region of partial darkness. The eclipse is not seen from every place on earth, but only from the locations which are situated either in the penumbra or the umbra regions. From these locations, it would appear as though the moon has gone dark. The solar eclipse happens when the sun, moon, and earth are aligned in that order. Therefore, a solar eclipse would only occur during a new moon, causing a shadow to fall on certain portions of the earth. A solar eclipse can be of different types depending on what part of the shadow you are located in. There are three types of eclipses, that is the partial eclipse, the total eclipse, and the annular eclipse. A total eclipse is where the sun is covered completely by the moon. The portion of the earth that is in the umbra region of the moon's shadow would experience a total solar eclipse. An annular eclipse happens when the moon covers the sun, but the sun can be seen around the edges of the moon. This happens when the sun, moon, and earth are aligned, but because of the moon's orbit, the moon is quite far away from the earth. A partial eclipse happens only when a portion of the sun is blocked by the moon. It occurs when the observer is within the penumbra region of the moon's shadow. Of the three eclipses, the total eclipses are extremely rare. Partial and annular eclipses are more frequent. Most of the eclipses that we encounter are mostly of the partial or annular type. A word of caution: never ever look at an eclipse directly with your eyes. Always use special protective eye gear that is meant for viewing solar eclipses when viewing a solar eclipse, as the sun's powerful rays can permanently damage your eyes. Now let's learn about the lunar eclipse. Lunar eclipse occurs when the sun, earth, and moon are aligned in that order. Therefore, a lunar eclipse would occur only during a full moon. Now, if you look at the umbra and the penumbra region of the earth, the umbra region is much more larger than that of the moon. And therefore, during a lunar eclipse, when the moon moves into the umbra region of the earth, all the people on the regions of the night side of the earth will be able to view the total lunar eclipse. It would last only a few minutes though. Partial lunar eclipse is when the moon is in the penumbra region of the earth's shadow. During a total lunar eclipse, the moon appears to be red. This is because as the sunlight is filtered through the layers of the earth's atmosphere, it is the red light that mostly falls on the moon and gets reflected. Let's take a quick recap of what we have learned in this video. The moon is the earth's only natural satellite. The apparently changing shapes of the moon as it moves along its orbit around the earth are referred to as the phases of the moon. Humans have successfully launched hundreds of artificial satellites above the Earth as well as other planetary bodies for various purposes. The Sun, the star of a solar system, is powered by explosive chemical reactions in which hydrogen is continuously converted into helium. Eclipses occur when one object in the sky moves into the shadow of another such object, causing viewing of the object to be totally or partially blocked. Depending on the order of alignment of the Sun, Moon, and Earth, we experience solar or lunar eclipse. Now, before I say goodbye, I would like to remind you, don't let anything or anyone block your shine. You keep shining, keep learning, and stay curious. We see you soon again. Goodbye.